Our reading for this evening comes once again from 1 Kings. 1 Kings chapter 19, verses 1 to 18 reads, Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, and how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, So may the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life like the life of one of them by this time tomorrow. Then he was afraid. He got up and fled for his life, and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah. He left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, and came and sat down under a solitary broom tree. He asked that he might die. It is enough. Now, O Lord, take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors. Then he lay down under the broom tree and fell asleep. Suddenly, an angel touched him and said to him, Get up and eat. He looked, and there at his head was a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. He ate and drank and lay down again. The angel of the Lord came a second time, touched him, and said, Get up and eat. Otherwise, the journey will be too much for you. He got up and he ate and drank. Then he went in the strength of that food 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mount of God. At that place he came to a cave and spent the night there. Then the word of the Lord came to him, saying, What are you doing, Elijah? He answered, I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. For the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away. He said, Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. Now there was a great wind, so strong that it was splitting mountains and breaking rocks in pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a sound of sheer silence. When Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. Then there came a voice to him that said, What are you doing here, Elijah? And he answered, I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away. Then the Lord said to him, Go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus. When you arrive, you shall anoint Hazael as king over Aram. Also, you shall anoint Jehu, son of Nishim, the king over Israel. And you shall anoint Elisha, son of Shaphat, and Abel-Meholah as prophet in your place. Whoever escapes from the sword of Hazael, Jehu shall kill. And whoever escapes the sword of Jehu, Elijah shall kill. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. I think Mary used the phrase, May the Lord bless the reading of this scripture. And I feel like that's a good way to end when you talk about death. Yep. So this particular text for my sermon, I've titled it, When We Need a Nap and a Snack to Be Able to Hear God. And I really like it because that's basically what Elijah does. He has a nap and a snack, and he's able to move forward in what God has called him to. And I just really appreciate sometimes the way God is tender. Granted, that last piece of the scripture, maybe not the most tender aspects of God, or at least what is attributed to God. If you can read Matt's shirt, it says, I did not say that, God. God may feel that way about part of this text. And yet, in this particular text, Elijah is at a point where he has tried to do everything possible to appease God. He's been the prophet that he knew how to be. He has sought the teachings and ways to bring back the Israelites from their worship of other gods. And in doing so, he has also taken others' lives. Jezebel in this text is seen as this great, terrible woman. And that's a whole other sermon. But her words struck him to the point of great fear that he flees. And he takes his servant with him up to a point, and then he continues on. And it's in that continuation that he finally says, I've had enough. I can't do this anymore. May I just die? And to be at a place where you are asking that God take your life is a great source of despair. And the fact that this text is on All Saints, when we remember those who have died and transitioned from this life to the next, we know how precious life is. We know how complicated despair and sorrow and grief and depression can be. And Elijah was in it. There is no mistaking from this text that God meets us in some of the most difficult moments of our lives and how our souls long. Sometimes it feels like we can't take any more, and that is exactly where Elijah was. He genuinely could not handle any more. And he was fearful for his life. And if you're fearful for your life, I can imagine praying that God take it before somebody else takes it is a genuine prayer. Because then at least you trust that God is with you. And so here's Elijah, asking God to take his life. He has fallen asleep. I don't know about you, but on some of those really, really hard days, when the world feels like it's caving in around you, one of the sweetest releases is that moment your head hits the pillow and you know you can actually sleep. Sometimes sleep evades us when we're that stressed or that worried, so that when it finally does reach us and our bodies can begin to relax and we can actually take those slow, deep breaths that usher us into that deep sleep. That is where Elijah met God. I often will hear from folks that sometimes they'll fall asleep praying and they feel bad about it. And I say, well, God clearly knew you needed rest. So may you see your sleep as an aspect of your prayer. And sometimes people will fall asleep in sermons and I'm like, man, you really needed sleep. I'm so glad I could usher you into that sweetness that you needed. And so this is where Elijah is. He is met by God in sleep. And then God says, you need to eat and you need to drink. Get up. And he is fed and he is nourished with water. And he goes back to sleep. And he is fed and nourished once again. It reminds us that our basic needs of food and water are part of our journey of sustaining through difficult times. Some of our friends recently had one of their parents die unexpectedly. And we've been bringing them food, but then I realized, man, when you're in grief, you don't really want like a full meal. So we went and got all these different kinds of snacks so that they could just have them on hand so that they could at least say they ate something that day, even if they didn't have an appetite. And to be able to say, just eat and drink. About a month or so ago, I had a really hard season with my recovery in eating disorders, and one of my dear friends just texted and said, checking in on you. Have you had something to eat? Have you had something to drink? And have you had a hug? And I was able to say yes to all of those. But it was the first time that somebody had asked me that. Usually my question is, how are you holding up? Or do you need anything? And it was just very manageable. It was, have you had a bite to eat? Have you had a drink of water? Have you had a hug? And I was blown away by the simplicity of that text, because it really met me in the struggle that I was in. And I love this text because that's basically what God does for Elijah. He says, here's food, here's water, here's sleep. And then he says, let's go for the journey. And so then Elijah goes forward into his journey, and the word of the Lord, I'm not sure how it met him. Maybe it was another angel of the Lord, or maybe it was just while he was journeying, but we're told that the word of the Lord met Elijah and said, go forth and go outside the cave and God is about to pass by. And why we have rock-shattering wind, an earthquake, and a fire, I don't know. But sometimes I think we assume that's where we'll see God, in those earth-shattering moments. But I genuinely believe Elijah wouldn't have been able to receive it then. It's only in the silence that Elijah is brave enough to go out. If you had just been given word from Jezebel that she will kill you the next day, and you don't know where her soldiers are, maybe they have followed you, maybe they are coming, to then have all these natural disasters right outside your cave, I don't know, even if you had the greatest of faith, if you would go to the entrance of the cave in hoping to see God. That's a lot of sensory stuff. And if you have already been feeling so raw that you are ready to die, you probably aren't ready to go and see natural disasters. And so there's this sheer silence. And I love that the text says when Elijah heard it. When Elijah heard that sheer silence, he covered his face and went out. And that's when God met him, when he was ready. And he was able to hear it. And then God gives him instructions for how to carry on the work that he's been tasked with. And again, that's a whole other sermon to unpack. But for this evening, on All Saints' Day, I'm reminded that the cloud of witnesses, of the saints who have gone before us, no matter how long it has been since we've lost somebody, today can be heavy. Today can be hard. Today can bring up those questions about why or how could it have happened? And so we may be feeling heavy. Maybe not to the point where Elijah was, but heavy nonetheless. And maybe we too need to leave here. Maybe it won't be a nap. Hopefully it'll just be sleep and a meal to replenish our souls, to give us enough nourishment to make it to tomorrow. The saints have taught us that time is short, but the saints have also taught us that we can make it through, that they journey alongside us, teaching us continually. When Robin read the litany this evening, there was the line, "For those who have loved us well and taught us how to love others." That is my grandmother, one of the women we named our son after, Julia. She will forever be walking amongst my family. And she knew how to cook. When we'd go visit, she'd say, "Oh, let me just whip you up something." Let me tell you, whipping up something wasn't cereal in a bowl. It was dumplings and spare ribs. And you're like, oh, okay, we have different definitions of whipping up. But that's who she was. And you see, in times when it can get really, really tough, we need to lean on the strength of our ancestors. We need to lean on the strength of the saints. It doesn't have to be grand or big or anything. It can be a nap and a snack. Because your very basic needs matter to God. Your ability to make it to the next day matters to God. So if this season is heavy for you, if you can listen to the story of Elijah and say, that hits close to home, I hope in the coming days you remind yourself to have something to eat, have something to drink, and to find time to rest. If you're where Elijah was at the end of this text, where he is ready for the next steps in his discipleship, I pray that you will walk alongside those who aren't yet ready, giving them encouragement and strength. Because the reality is, we are all saints, and we all need one another. Elijah was by himself. We are not meant to be by ourselves in times of despair, so God met him. When we are seeing those around us struggling, may we be able to show up. May we be able to care for them. Not because we can fix it or make it better, but because we can remind them that they are not alone, and we can embody the presence of God. Thank God we worship a creator that cares about our basic needs, tends to them, and desires us to be well. May we work together to make that a reality for each and every one of us. And on those really tough days, when you can't go on, feel free to say, I need a nap and a snack, for Scripture tells me so. Thanks be to God.